Mm. Hello, check, 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 check. Okay, well, there we go. That was odd. Is it using the right microphone? Yes, okay. All right, yesterday we left off with this, what seemed to be the end of this particular stretch of the conversation. Don't know how much they're going to be talking about, what they were talking about, but the idea was, that Trainwrecks made the claim, or makes the claim in this video, that Piker lives like a capitalist, even though he professes socialist values. And it's not entirely clear, I don't think at all at any point in this conversation, what these socialist values are, what it is to live a capitalist lifestyle, whatever that means, what a socialist lifestyle would look like, if such a thing could exist at all, and what, if anything, we can kind of draw out of this idea that if there's an inconsistency between the values and the way one lives, what, if anything, does this tell us about those values or the person? There was a few, I think, kind of things we ended up, or I ended up coming, think, which I'd have to, I guess, rewatch some of these videos in order to jog my memory. But I think the idea was something like this. Why is Hasan a socialist? Because he professes certain kinds of values. And the idea is that socialism as a political and economic system is either the only way of realizing these values to a maximal degree, or it is the best way to realize these values to the maximal degree. So what do I mean by these values? Values are things that you care about, arguably care about, things that you want to realize in the world. So what are these values? Seems it's not entirely clear what Hasan or what Piker thinks what his values are precisely. But presumably there's some sort of positive rights that individuals have, and that because they have these positive rights, they are owed certain things. Certain things arguably are things like healthcare, housing, food. These seem to be like what people need, and satisfying one's needs is a basic positive right that is owed to people by others. So if you don't provide healthcare or housing or food to other people, you are somehow violating their rights. The idea for him, I think, is either, so we have these values of like needing to provide healthcare, needing to provide housing, needing to provide food. And it seems you can do more or less than that. You can provide less housing or more housing. We're doing that now. You can already donate to charities, presumably. Certainly in Australia, you can do this, that help you with these three things, these positive rights. And presumably those things, like charities, exist in America. So one way of satisfying these values is by donating to a charity that looks after these values, or that works towards realizing these values in the world. You might think there's some sort of relationship between donating more and producing more of those sorts of outcomes. So if you donate $5 to a charity that works to providing food for the needy, then you have fed at least one person $5 worth. We can imagine that each meal is $5 for the sake of argument. If that's the case, if you provided therefore $500, you would feed 500. No, oh no, not math. My enemy. Well, let's say, all right, one for one. If you provide $5, it'll feed 5 people. So assuming this thing scales 1 to 1, if you give $500, that feeds 500 people, and so on and so on. So, if you donate anything, it's going to produce these values. You're going to realize some of these values to some degree. the more that you donate, the greater degree it's going to be realized. The more people are going to be fed, the more people are going to be housed. And then obviously, if you cut back on that sort of spending, it's going to reduce the amount of people who get these sorts of things. It's going to reduce the amount that these goals are realized. Right, but presumably his feeling about this is that there is either, I mean, I think there's, how might we think about this? Right, so the idea is, how can I put this? Values, end states, outcomes, realizing outcomes, that there is some sort of sufficient or satisfying threshold of realizing these values, such that once they are realized, anything beyond that is supererogatory. But everything after that is a duty. Right. So presumably, since we live in a free market society, in which individuals can voluntarily use their wealth or their labor how they choose, some people choose to give it to charity in helping realize the sorts of values that he cares about or proclaims to care about. Presumably, he's looking out into the world and seeing there's not enough. So if we had a 0 to 1 and we're at like a 0.3, if 1 is every single individual is housed and has healthcare, and 0 is that none of the people who need it are able to get it, and you have a 0.3, and obviously he thinks that this is not enough people. So, since voluntary action isn't enough to ensure that people get these sorts of things, we need socialism. And the idea, presumably, is by somehow democratizing the work environment, by increasing taxation, and setting up programs funded by these new taxes. This is somehow going to either maximize the values such that there will no longer be anyone who is ever not fed. It will be better than, so in other words, it'll be better than charity. So it won't be perfect, but it's better than what exists. These seem to be the two options. That's better than, or it's the best way, such that maybe there are alternative models besides charity. Maybe there is, but socialism would be the best way. Right. So, what does socialism require? Socialism requires, by necessity, large amounts of taxation. Taxation is gathered through coercion. So, in other words, the state says or commands you to do something, which is give up a certain portion of your financial value, and then give it to them. And if you don't do that, then you will be punished. And you can be punished with restriction of your freedoms, or they'll take you whatever they want from you to a certain extent, etc., etc. And if we're attempting to democratize the workforce, if we're attempting to put the workers in charge of the companies, then we eliminate voluntary contracts. We annihilate many market freedoms. And presumably we also have to eliminate how people choose to spend their money. Which effectively means that people can no longer, should no longer have the freedom to do what they wish with their money and time. Because if they do that, it might end up causing inequality, and it might end up reducing the amount of resources we have to satisfy these positive rights that he's so interested in satisfying. So I think the idea is, I think the idea for Trainwrecks, maybe he doesn't think this, But if you are so willing to use force against other people to realize some sort of values, then you must care a lot about these values. These values must be very valuable. So valuable, in fact, that you would expect someone to organize their life around them. So think about it this way. When you see militant vegans attack people who perhaps work there, like throwing red paint on them, used to be a thing, or breaking into laboratories to free monkeys, or attacking ships that do fishing or whaling, etc., etc. They are using force, right? They are using violence to some extent and aggression, and they violate the rights of others. And why do they do this? Well, they do it because they think that these sorts of extremes are morally justified because of how important their values are. Right? So valuable, in fact, that they can't let other people make decisions for themselves. Their decisions effectively have to be overridden, or the other values of the other people are kind of mooted in a sense, such that these people want to do this. That's how much they care about it. Now, presumably, the people who do these sorts of things, they live these values in their own life, right? That's why they care about them so much, right? And they're willing to act upon them to enforce it upon others. We can see the same thing, arguably, with something like Islam, right? Let me write that down. Islam. What I mean by that, so you cannot produce a visual depiction of Muhammad. It's considered, for whatever reason, a very, very bad thing to do. You can't besmirch his name. And they see it, or at least some of them see it, not all of them, of course, but some of them see it as anything like that is an insult to Muhammad. Muhammad is extremely valuable or important to them. And so they are justified in using violence, aggression, and violating your rights and force in order to punish you or to stop you from doing these things. Right, so again, what we have is people having certain kinds of values, and that they take these values so seriously that they use physical force on other people. And also the other important thing is that they take these values to be something to live their life in accordance with, to the extreme, to which they will never violate those values. So the thought goes. Presumably the idea is like, although maybe Trainwrecks hasn't thought about this in terms of like political violence or the coercive apparatus of the state. But the idea is if you take these values so seriously that you are willing to kind of enact force upon people who disagree with you, then you must like live them very strictly in your own life. Right. There's some sort of, it's not entirely sure what the connection is there, but presumably there's something there. And the idea is something like this. If we're worried about people's needs and we're worried about maximizing those needs, or satisfying as many of those needs as possible, then you should ultimately be sacrificing lesser values to realize those higher order values. So you can rank them, right? You can imagine being entitled to the fruits of your labor, which is in this case the profits, positive rights such as access to medical care, housing, food, that these things are so high that you're willing to kind of violate individual rights to do it, that any other values you have, such as luxury, such as nice things, such as living locale, these things in terms of the ranking of values that you have should be way down the bottom, such that these other values are eclipsed. These lower ordered values, we'll say luxury. Something Hasan does say is he loves luxury. That these values should be much lower such that anytime there's a conflict between luxury and satisfying people's needs should always override the luxury one, except in cases in which luxury is in some sense needed to ensure that one can continue on satisfying these higher order values, right? That's the kind of idea. So a way of thinking about this is a thought experiment by Peter Singer, where he says something like, look, imagine you are going to a job interview, you have your best pair of shoes on that are worth $300, you walk past a park every day, on this particular day, the night before, it was raining, and there's a pond, and as you're walking to the interview this day, you can see there's a small child drowning in the pond. You can't see anyone else around, you don't see any guardians, it's just the child flapping around in there. If you stop to save the child, which you can easily do because it's very, very shallow water, you will be late for your interview and you will ruin your $300 pair of shoes, right? If you keep going, if you choose not to save the child and go to the interview, you will keep your nice 300 pairs of shoes, you'll have a new job, but a child will die, right? Peter Singer throws up this thought experiment and says, what should you do? The intuitive answer that most people give is that you ought to save the child. And when it's brought up that you're going to ruin your $300 pair of shoes, the intuitive response that people generally have is that that is a non-reason for not saving the child. And what I mean by that is that it is so inconsequential, these pair of shoes worth $300, compared to the life of a child, that you don't even take it as a counter reason for why you shouldn't save them. It just falls completely by the wayside. So the idea is you value these shoes, right? But in light of this other thing, right, this other value you have, or this kind of moral duty you have, you recognize that this higher value, it totally eclipses the other one. So the idea is, I think, is that if you say that you care about these sorts of values about saving the drowning child, you would be kind of willing that all other values that you have ought to be eclipsed by this higher one. And the idea, I think, is like, since you keep preaching about these higher order values and that we should effectively enforce them through the coercive apparatus of the state, that is now justified because of how important these values are. Since you seem to spend the money on houses and cars and clothes, etc., you're effectively choosing not to save the drowning child, like every time you spend this money, right? Because you could spend the $3 million on a house or $1 million on a car or whatever, right? You could do that, or you could donate it, or you could redistribute it to satisfy these higher order values. And the idea, I think, for Trainwrecks is, and he kind of states this, although very poorly, is that, sure, this might not be socialism per se, because it's not the state doing the redistribution, but it's a replication of it, or the next best thing, and surely the next best thing is better than what you're currently doing now. So the idea, again, is like, there's something about this idea about more is better than less. And that you could be doing more. And according to the kind of value scheme that you've described, you ought to be doing more. And the fact that you don't do more, or you don't organize your kind of private affairs as a kind of miniature model of what you expect the whole country to operate as, something has gone wrong here. It's not entirely clear yet, although I think I'm getting a bit closer to the idea. It's not entirely clear what is going wrong. I guess, I mean, no one's watching, so I guess I can just keep rattling on. I think it connects to this idea of values as not being, well, not that they're not real. I think the idea is there's some sort of constructivist project happening. Or maybe there's a few things. So there's clearly a kind of game theory thing going on. This kind of tit for tat thing, which is that if you say to do something and you don't do it, it's kind of violating some sort of contract that I should do it. Or maybe it's kind of Kantian, right? It's kind of violating it. It's kind of setting up a categorical imperative, and then a person chooses to act inconsistently to it. So therefore, they're kind of like not obeying the categorical imperative. Maybe not. Maybe it's more contracting. Because I think the idea is something like this, right? If you see someone saying "don't litter," right, and then everyone chooses not to litter, certain individuals in that society can now get away with littering, because the overwhelming people don't, and so the amount that one person does gets completely counterbalanced by the others. But when they get caught, people get really uppity about that, because there's this idea of like, if there are rules, then they're applicable to all, and that once someone kind of chooses not to obey a rule or a law or whatever, it kind of throws the whole thing in the toilet. The reason's still not clear why we would think that. I presume it's some sort of contract, that if there's some sort of agreement between persons about what we're supposed to be doing and you don't do it, it kind of vitiates the contract, right? It vitiates the morality, such that I can kind of do it now, or that I'm permitted to do it, or I shouldn't be, or it's not that I shouldn't do it, or perhaps I shouldn't be reprimanded for doing it, or punished for doing it. I think something like that. I think maybe the idea is something like, values are the kinds of things that are supposed to synthesize with reality. What do I mean by that? What do I mean by that? Synthesize with reality. Well, the idea of something like this: values are a priori. You can't. You never. Well, maybe you do. Maybe they do. How to put this? How would we put this? What causes us to act? Why do we do the things that we do? We do them for motives, right? We form intentions, right? And some of these intentions, or some of these actions that we do, are guided by a larger kind of plan, right? A plan that we kind of decide to follow up on, right? And why do we initiate a plan? Well, presumably we initiate the plan because there is something we wish to bring about. Why do we wish to bring about? Because we care about it or we value it, right? So suppose someone picks up a guitar and starts learning a piece of music, right? They start learning chords, right? We go, why would you do that? They don't do it randomly. Presumably, they do it for a reason. The reason is that they value what they're doing, or there's some sort of goal that they value, and that part of learning to play the instrument is part of this larger goal, right? So there's a kind of construction of values that's happening, right? That a person, in order to kind of shape their actions, shape their project, shape their life, requires setting goals, and goals are dependent upon realizing certain kinds of values, right? And what it is to live a meaningful life is to pursue is to set these projects and to pursue them, to have values and to kind of realize them. So there's this idea of meaningfulness, this idea of construction. Constructivist project. Values. Meaning. Shaping one's life. So I guess the idea is something like, so why is it important that someone lives their values? Faith that works is dead. think the idea is. What do I think the idea is? Something to do with meaningfulness, something to do with shaping a life, something to do with standing for something. Standing for something seems to connect up with the meaning of life. Standing for something doesn't mean just saying, it means doing, right? And it means the more that you say something's valuable, the more it should be dictating your life. Lifestyles? He lives a capitalist lifestyle. That's an accusation that's made of him. He lives a capitalist lifestyle. What the fuck does that even mean, right? If I that he generates profit. I mean, everyone generates some form of profit, right? Everyone expects to get more out of what they put in, right? Otherwise, what would be the point of putting it in? So, if you want a house and you decide to build it from scratch, yeah, if you want a house and you decide to build it from scratch, a lot of works get poured into it. But I wouldn't say that the house is equal to the same value as the labor, right? Why wouldn't I say that? Well, it doesn't seem like I would say that because if I had to choose between doing the labor and the house, I would choose the house, right? Because that's what I value, right? So in some sense, right, and if I was given either all the labor of making a house or the house, seems to be something to the idea of. Yeah, there seems to be something to the idea of. Oh, fuck! I've lost the thought. I've lost the thought. All right, come on. There's a house. You want to build a house. You would value the house over the thing, right? Because if you had a choice between A and B, you would choose B. B's the house. So B is worth more. Right. And the only reason you do A is because it gets you B. The more that you value B, the more you're kind of willing to sacrifice things for it. Right? That's the idea. It would seem very strange. Values should in some sense be lived. It's because values guide action, values shape life, and when someone acts contrary to those values, shows an incongruency between values and between actions, or between proclaimed values and actions. Is that telling us anything useful? It might be telling us that a person doesn't actually value what they think they purport to value, right? That's the idea. That's part of the idea. So, if someone said if they valued capitalism, someone said that and then ran a co-op, or someone ran opened a business and then hired employees and then gave away portions of the company such that these people who have invested no capital now owned that business, right? To such a degree in which the original creator of the business ended up getting voted out of the company. If that can happen, I don't know if that can even happen in it. Would we say that the person values capitalism? I presume not. It's very strange. Right. Capitalist lifestyle. So a lifestyle means that you have certain values that you live in accordance to, right? That's what it means to live a lifestyle. So if you think about like a Christian lifestyle or a Muslim lifestyle or a Quaker lifestyle or surfy lifestyle, a Hollywood lifestyle, I don't know if these things count, right? But the idea is, what does it mean to do that? Well, it means to have some sort of guiding value or set of valuables that's kind of fixed, such that they guide or that they shape one's life in such a way that one's life is and one's character and one's kind of activities are completely structured around these activities. That's kind of the idea. So what would it look like to live a capitalist lifestyle? Seems a bit weird to say. Well, an intuitive place to say is like maximizing profits, right? That is the capitalist lifestyle, such that um, so I don't maximize profits. I'm sitting here talking to myself about two people or three people who will never ever know me, um, and people who will never know or care about my thoughts about this. But I choose to pursue this project, right? Am I living a capitalist lifestyle? No. Intuitively, no. We wouldn't say I'm living a socialist lifestyle either. I mean, am I? I mean, I think to some extent we can say it, right? That I am living a capitalist lifestyle. In what sense? It's not clear to me that capitalism has any sort of inherent value system, right? As Piker kind of points out, I think, is that socialism doesn't have. Um, this might be part of his objection. Is that socialism doesn't have values either, or no inherent value system. Which seems a bit weird for him to say, right? Because in a capitalist economy, you can still have these exact same values, right? You just realize them in a very different way, which is through charitable donations or through charitable work, such as going to a foreign country and helping people or volunteering at a soup kitchen, blah, 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 blah. So it's not like, if someone valued helping others, if someone valued feeding other people who couldn't feed themselves, housing other people who couldn't house themselves, um, we wouldn't call them a socialist just because their life is guided and shaped by pursuing these ends. We wouldn't do that, right? We wouldn't call them a capitalist either. I think, yeah, ordinarily when we talk about capitalists, we're talking about maximizing profits. And when we normally talk about socialism, we're talking about what are we normally talking about? Owning the means of production, workers owning it. But then whatever, but this is still guided presumably by, but that mean they're both guided by some sort of value system, right? Capitalism is just a natural result of taking individual liberty seriously. Um, Socialism is about equality. I feel like there's something there. I'm probably gonna have to think about this by myself, like typing it out. Because there does seem something suspicious. I will say this, right? I think Piker is generally right in the sense that um socialism might have an inherent value system such as workers or individual workers um, owning completely their own labor. Um, might say something that seems whether they should own the means of production. I'm not entirely sold on that, but regardless, I think the idea is it doesn't seem that his lifestyle is completely like he can kind of get away with saying like, look, what you're describing is charity. If we're just talking about donating more money to these sorts of like setting up a charity and donating to it, that's just charity. That's just like that's not capitalism, it's not socialism because it's charitable, it's voluntary and not forced. Um, so in some way, he wants it a world. He thinks a better world would be a world in which people are forced, as opposed to people who voluntarily give up to help others. Strikes me as very strange. Um, but there is something. There is something there about. Like, what the fuck is it? There is something there about someone saying X and doesn't follow up on it, or it seems very rich. I think it's got something to do with this hierarchy of values. Standing for something. Values. Styles of living. Styles of life. Shaping life according to values. Meaningful life. There is something to be said for. So I think one of the main points that Trainwrecks raises is that there is something to be said for. You say that this is a way that the world, if these values, these are the ways that the world should be structured, and that you don't structure your own life, your own private life, and the way that you run your life in accordance to these values. You need to set an example, right? I think people have a very strong intuition about something like that. Um, that you need to, in order to, the best way to kind of bring people into the fold, so to speak, is to live a certain kind of way in accordance to your values. And you will hear people, I think on all sides of the political aisle, will recognize that, look, you might not agree with someone, you might think they're incredibly evil, but if someone has values that they purport, that they have, that they say guide their life, and they say that other people should, because values are arguably supported by reasons, and that reasons are intersubjective, that we should expect that other people should adopt our reasons. And there's something admirable, like aesthetically kind of pleasing, or an acknowledgement of something good, if that's not moral, but someone who lives in accordance to their values. That though we might not end up agreeing with them, we do end up respecting them. Right? So I guess there's this idea of if you aren't living your values, then you aren't respectful. You aren't worthy of respect to some extent. But also it shows that what you're saying is the case can't work, because the people who shout it from the rooftop the most, who indeed have made their living from doing so, don't ultimately marry themselves to those values to the same degree. So you might think something like, well, so he says, Piker says, blah, blah, well, that would just be charity. Charity's not thing. If you actually care about this shit, you would still do it, even though it was under non-ideal conditions. But also, again, if we think about something like ministers or imams, if we had, if we look at like televangelists who preach certain kind of gospels, right, and then have their own private jets, have houses and mansions, and they're preaching about the humility and humbleness and charity of Jesus, right? We look at that and we say that something is not right here, that there is something, we don't respect people who do that. We kind of look at them with suspicion about whether these values are values that are credible. And we definitely don't get sold on the idea that we should be living that way either. So although that isn't, I don't think, like a kind of a priori argument, does have a lot of kind of compelling weight behind it. And I think the idea too is like, if you have these values, right, that you say that the entirety of society should be organized around, we would hope, right, we would expect that you would live these values in your own private life under the non-ideal circumstances to the best of your ability. right? And if you don't do that, then something has gone seriously wrong here, right? Like seriously wrong. But it's not clear what it is, right? Because you can't say that the values are wrong, right? Because people have, if someone says, don't kill or don't murder, right? If a murderer says to you, it's actually really bad to murder, right? And then you say, but you murdered, right? It doesn't mean that now murder is okay, right? That doesn't follow. So I don't think it's got to do with individual actions. Maybe I think it's got to do with the values, how values are realized. Hypocrisy, accusations of hypocrisy they signify something. They signify the meaningless of this life, because this life doesn't stand for anything. Standing. Yeah, I think there's something there. All right. I can't remember what this was about.
I want to give him a chance to explain his own clue. Otherwise, we're gonna get lost.
Where is it? Hold on. You linked it in the
Group chat.
Match a small percentage.
I gotta pee
yourself,
while this plays.
Look
at him undermining 50 grand. Like, I'm sorry, I don't have like $700 million from fucking crypto gambling sponsorships. Like, that's crazy. He just said a small percentage, like 50 grand from my pocket is like tiny. Like, listen, I don't really talk about this too frequently, but goddamn do motherfuckers always undermine that shit. They don't shut the fuck up about a $1,000 shirt for 700 years. But the moment that I fucking put 50 grand out of my own goddamn pocket to something I fucking believe in, that's a tiny percentage, dog. What the fuck? If you can't shut the fuck up about the $1,000 Gucci shirt, you should be 50 times more vocal about the 50 grand, right? Not once did I ever bring that up. Not once. But when you undermine that, when you make it seem like the infrastructure that we had to create on the back end to ensure that American and foreign fucking donators could very easily dump funds.
Here's what there was to ask. So, like, I think you got a little angry at a certain clip instead of watching the entire thing, which maybe is understandable since you get a lot of heat in that department. But I think what's important to come on, bro. They're like, what are you?
He's not gonna moderate anyway. Just go on. Just
we take going. A 2.5 minute fucking break, and now he gets up.
Bro,
we all get back
from
our 2.5 minute break, and he just gets up now.
He's having a toenail break. Just go on. It doesn't matter. He was not gonna moderate anyway.
You gotta see, you know how nasty that is, chewing on your toenails.
Yes,
you know how putrid that is.
I know. I do know. Yes. Okay, go on.
You were
talking to Will. As far as I understand, you were talking to Will about I don't know what you were talking to Will about actually, but you were talking to Will about some shit, and you.
Yeah, I was going through
I think I don't know why you brought me up.
No, let's pull up the Will. Did he delete the VOD? Is it there?
I don't know. I'm sure that it's probably on YouTube though.
So there is the video. It starts at 58:36. I think it's important to watch the context of the entire thing because by no means was
we can't be watching a whole video. I will take
your bro. It's like it's maximum like I don't even know like what would that be like 4 minutes? I'm just like the context, bro. The context matters here. Like you took like 3 seconds of what I said that he asked me a question and I answered. You took that 3-second part and you flipped the fuck out.
Well, you're here. Just explain what you were doing, and I will 100% believe you. I don't even care.
I will. I'm gonna grab my juice.
Yo, is he gone again?
He's gone. But what is it? Okay, describe to me what the clip is.
There's not much. Okay, there's nothing. There's not much to it. There's like nothing.
So I think the importance of you watching it was to show that like, I think he took a small couple seconds of the clip and kind of got the wrong idea of the context. Like by no means was like going in there to badmouth you. It was actually the opposite.
So it's Will never brought up the Turkey charity, and it's Train who was gonna make an argument about his initial point about how he wants Hasan to do the systems, but then since Will,
but like, why are you guys having a conversation about me in general? Like I don't understand.
Yo, I give context to people. So the context is that So Will brought up the fact that Hasan raised money for charity for Turkey in the context of Train bring up socialism and how we can do things to further socialism in society. And then what happened then is that Train was going to say that the Turkey thing was crowdfunded, therefore cannot be kind of used as a yo guys. I'm partaking in these socialism systems, whatever.
And let me clarify on that, because this is an important clarification to be completely fair toward Hasan.
Yep.
The effect of what he did is the same as both possible intentions, right? So the effect is a net positive no matter how you look at it, right? So the effect of what you did is a net positive. Do you understand? I want to make that very clear. I think what's being argued is the way certain things that you do, the intention that's being described behind your actions, right? Like, that's what I'm referring to, right? I think a lot of times it's used as a, hey, look, I did this. What a great thing I did. I did this, this is an example of what I preach. This is this. People use this as examples of things you've done. But in reality, a crowd fund with a small percentage matched, especially we get into what you made during the entirety of those 5 streams, I think these are the more genuine ways to bring it up, right? But when it's used to show a intention, I think that's the wrong part in the category of what you're doing. But the net positive from the effect is the same. Therefore, that's why I don't think there's much to talk about here. Does that make any sense? It's the intention that's questionable. And the way it's used as like a credibility is very odd to me. That's the issue. That's why it was brought up. The intention of why you did that, right? A lot of people in your community and yourself use it as like a, yo, I did this, I'm consistent with what I do, blah, 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 right? But I would argue based on, right, it being crowdfunded compared to the part of what you matched relative to what you make and relative to what you made during the streams of doing the charity, that's the part that's questionable. But the effect of the charity is a net positive no matter how you look at it.
Okay, let me just describe something real quick. So first and foremost, dude, for someone who says you hate Reddit, you sound a lot like Redditors, like especially when you're saying this.
I don't go on Reddit.
This is the most Reddit ass, like cynical ass fucking take I could have ever seen in my entire life.
It's not cynical when the intention is being misrepresented.
The intention of why I wanted to set up a charity, set up a fundraiser, a donation portal for the victims of the Turkey-Syria earthquake is because in 1999, when I was living in Istanbul, as a young boy, I survived a very devastating earthquake where 17,000 people died by the most conservative estimate. I know how fucking awful that shit is when a gigantic earthquake impacts a state that is underfunded. My state that I lived in for, the first 18 years of my life. And I also knew that you can't really trust the government in Turkey. Many of the Turkish people will tell you this. So there had to be a way to fund and to give money to specific non-governmental organizations.
I agree.
I knew what the non-governmental organizations were. I went in. I found exactly whichever ones were the best ones by talking to my friends and some knowledge I had over previous earthquakes and natural disasters. And one of the main issues there was that a lot of these organizations, like Ahbap, especially Ahbap, did not have a portal to allow ease of access. Like you couldn't just click on a link and do a drop down, put your fucking information in and just like send dollars to Ahbap directly. So that is why I wanted to set up a fundraiser. Because I knew that
we're not arguing the fundraiser.
So that's the main intention behind why I did what I did.
Yes, and
there wasn't any like secondary reason or anything else.
I'm so tired of this. And then we're gonna do the topic. I guess both become like around the pot. I'm gonna be the devil. I'm gonna fucking say it. Okay, Train meant, yo, bruh, 2 mil is dank. Nobody says that 2 mil is not dank. 2 mil is dank. Thank you very much for Turkey. That's very sweet. It was absolutely colossal.
It's a net positive. No
50K for somebody like you is a fucking joke, Hasan. It's a joke.
I don't think 50K? There's a disagreement there. I don't think it's a joke. I don't think it's a little amount of money.
Based on your ad incentive deal with Twitch, wouldn't you argue that the days you ran those ads on those days, along with what you made, don't they add? I mean, didn't you make
when I originally started my contract? I thought it was, but no, you're wrong. You're wrong. No, it's not.
Was it close to that amount?
Insane. No, not even remotely close.
Okay. At the end of the day, listen, I don't want to listen. What you did was phenomenal. The effect was phenomenal. Do you understand?
So,
And
but hold on. This is
Yeah.
very important to address.
yes.
What you're doing right now is not genuine criticism. It's just pocket watching and also undermining something that I did that
The
it
pocket
wasn't even
watching is
supposed to.
justified
No,
based on what you
no,
preach.
hold on. No, that's bullshit. You're just pocket
Why not?
watching and then claiming that it's actually adequate to do so because you claim you're a socialist. No, I already described to you numerous fucking times what socialism is. Charity is not that. Pocket watching like a fucking blue-haired, non-binary Twitter user anarchist and being like, why don't you give all of your money and live in a fucking woodshed is not actually socialism. A lot of dumb motherfuckers on Twitter say that all the time
Why
to
is
me,
that
and I yell
example-
at them. Just because
So this is the poverty cult accusation. Again, that is a misrepresentation of what Trainwrecks is trying to highlight. Again, the idea here is that suppose that for every dollar you donated, you were able to satisfy the end state, right? For 1-to-1 ratio. So if you donate $2 million, that is going to help 2 million people. Let's just say that, right? Right. So now these end states that you wanted to make it such that they are always realized to the maximal degree for the coercive apparatus of the state, right? They would help. You could give up more. Since you don't have the apparatus of the state, you need the next best thing to realize these values, which means you're going to have to, in the same way that in a socialist society, arguably you couldn't buy a $3 million house because you either A, wouldn't be allowed to buy a house, it'd have to be given to you by the state, or there would have to be very strict restrictions about that, or B, you wouldn't be allowed to have that much money to buy that sort of kind of house, because if someone has that kind of money, it means that there's some sort of misdistribution of the wealth that's occurred in the state. So the idea of something like this, and this is the idea of, like, if you have like millionaires or if you have billionaires, right? The idea is if there's that much money located in one person, that by looking kind of at the way things are distributed and seeing this kind of like huge amount of this person with heaps, the socialist says that something has gone wrong here. This person should never have been allowed to reach that kind of money. Therefore, we are justified in taking to what we believe to be the top of the threshold, or the upper bound of the acceptable amount someone can have personally, and then redistributing it according to whatever pattern we see fit. Right. So the idea then is that the type of lifestyle that, say, Piker is living, in some sense, like, it seems possible that it could come about, but only under conditions in which all of these higher order values were satisfied to the nth degree, right? Then that kind of life could be brought about. But it could only be brought about if the state decided that that's how a life, if it's an acceptable way for someone to live. This might give someone the appearance of a poverty cult. But again, the idea is that that each is to be given according to their need. And the question is, the most natural question is, do you need a $3 million house? And if you don't need a $3 million house, then you shouldn't have a $3 million house. Right? So since you have something that we have decided you do not need, right, and you probably recognize that you don't need, or that you don't need as much as, say, someone needs food, and you could have used that money to make, of that money that you spent on the house, you could have used that for the feeding these people, then yeah, you have done something like categorically wrong according to this kind of view. So it gives the appearance of poverty cult, but really, whatever poverty he thinks is being generated by ensuring that there's a kind of equality as according to some sort of pattern, right? That's the mistake that Piker is either making or purposefully kind of obfuscating, so that people don't recognize that. He's right that it's not a poverty cult, but he's mistaken, I think, in dressing it up as saying that it's even that in the first place, because that's a complete misdirection of what socialism is attempting to accomplish and what sort of results, which is that people living high lifestyles or styles of life that are considered quite excessive, those sorts of lives couldn't exist and wouldn't be allowed to exist. So his type of life arguably wouldn't be allowed to exist under his own political system, under his own value system, because it wouldn't be allowed to, because that would be seen as a misuse of resources which could have been otherwise sent to people who needed them. And so by dressing it up in this way, he's able to dodge the problem, right? So the idea is something like, and we recognize, we intuitively recognize that it's not just about the amount of money that's given, but it's about the proportionality of what someone owns, right? And the more that someone gives to something they believe is important, the more that we recognize that they value it, right? The money is a representation of what we care about. And when you choose to spend it on certain things and not other things, you're effectively revealing to others and yourself the things that you really do care about, especially if this is a pattern over time. So, although certainly the type of lifestyle he wants to live, I don't think is inherently evil or wrong. It seems in some sense to be heavily incompatible with the values he's espousing. And importantly, it seems to me at least, that the values, that his lifestyle is incompatible with the way in which he believes that these values ought to be realized, right? And he gets very irritated because, again, $2 million, is that a lot? Well, that might be a lot for a person. Like, the idea again is like there seems to be some sort of invariant amount of good that's being done with the money, right? So in other words, when you donate $2 million, regardless of who gave up $2 million, that $2 million is going to have the same effect that the same $2 million would have from any other person who gave it, or would have had the same effect as in any way in which it would have been put together. So if 2 million people donated $1 each, or one person donated $2 million, or two people donated $1 million, the totality is going to have the same effect, regardless of how it's brought about. We do recognize that the goodness or the need of something also depends upon, it does become dependent upon the context in which it's generated. So, what's an example of that? So in the Bible, I don't remember precisely where, and I might get the story a bit wrong, but I think Jesus is outside of these donation boxes. Some people who are very rich donate a very large amount of money, and they feel very good and they congratulate themselves about doing it. And then an old beggar lady drops in a pittance of the amount that they did, that in terms of the raw figures is not even remotely close to what they rich people donated. And Jesus recognizes that there is something morally greater or something better about someone giving up more in the context of their life, and that says something about how they value things. So even though $2 million is a good amount for him to give up, and that is something to be lauded, if we look at the context of his life, and if we look in the context of the values that he says guide his life, right, and these types of values that inform his political identity, and that he's willing to enact violence against, that he's very happy to enact violence against people who disagree with him, and who aren't willing to voluntarily give up these things. We would expect more to be given than what he otherwise did, unless, of course, the only other way in which you could excuse it is if he had basically planned who deserves what more, and then gave up the same amount of money, but just spread it to different things. So the idea is that if you gave $2 million to the earthquake thing, and he didn't give another $10 million to it, as long as he's given the $10 million to something else that is equally of value, and spread it such that it's still satisfied and net positive, that might be is acceptable. So the criticism is more about again, living in accordance to one's values, how one believes these values ought to be realized, and what is sacrificing, or what's being sacrificed in order to produce those values. Because again, the idea is if we were to set up a socialist kind of state, someone like a Jeff Bezos would lose much more than someone like me or someone like you, presumably. And we would think that that's morally justified. And so we should think that, and, you know, a Bezos, to ensure that people get what they need, he would be brought down to the level of marginal utility. In other words, he would be getting what he needs and no more. And he would not be getting more than what he needs until the needs of others were satisfied. Right? And the same thing can be applied to Piker. But the fact that, you know, a Bezos doesn't do that should not stop someone, such as a Piker, from living that sort of a life. I think that's the idea. So, you know, and when we think about, again, if we take the analogy of the religious person, Christian desires or expects people to live in accordance to a certain set of values. Obviously, they are in the world, and not to be of the world. So they see other people not living that sort of lifestyle. But that does not mean then that the Christian says, well, I guess I should, you know, not live this way anymore. The idea is they are to attempt to, as best they can, continue to live this way that they prescribe, or they believe is prescribed by Scripture. So even though other people don't do it, even though you've given, like, in terms of invariant numbers, it's producing the same sort of outcome, in accordance to your values, in accordance to how those values inform how you think the political world should operate, and how people should be restricted such that we realize those values, seems very rich then for you to not live strictly in accordance to that, given that you are willing to perform like very extreme measures on people in the most kind of extreme way, which is through physical violence or the threat of physical violence.
Because you're not.
What is that example? The comeback, some extreme rebuttal of.
Because you sound like them, but you look like an ape, so no one thinks that you're like exactly behaving like them. But you are doing that, Train.
So, and now, I mean, because I've watched like the third part of this, we've only got an hour in. Like it has now just turned to insults, and like he's now just making insults about the way Trainwrecks looks. And that, I mean, reveals two things. It reveals frustration. It reveals an inability to respond to the actual point. It means to some extent that Trainwrecks has, in some sense, won, or at least in some sense has the reasons he's offered are starting to get to Piker. Or that he's just getting frustrated because he really believes that he's offered like some pretty compelling reasons to reject Trainwreck's view. But this particular point, maybe Trainwrecks doesn't articulate it particularly well. And I mean, given that I've spent, you know, at least 3 days thinking about this in live time, and it's been like, it's going to be up to 6 hours, and I still haven't quite articulated it. He is totally not to blame for this. But yeah, the idea is, yeah, you have values. You claim that these are very important values, such that the world, like our entire country, should be structured around realizing these values and structured in such a way that it's not voluntary but coerced that they do it. Why don't you live like that voluntarily? Why don't you do that? You could do more, and you according to your view, you should be doing more because you're willing. Yeah, and yeah.
You gotta stop,
brother. That blue hair. Okay, let's not go to insults.
But they do that. But they do that. They do that too. They do that. They do that exact same shit that you're doing right now. They do it to Mr. Beast. They do it to me all the fucking time. They, I'm sure, would do it to you if they thought that you were like a person who would like listen and respond to them. You're doing the exact same shit. You are crying like a fucking SJW instead of
crying like an SJW.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are. And that is one thing I will not fucking stand for.
No, listen. The effect of the charity is nice. Do you understand? It's a good thing. What you did was phenomenal to crowdfund that. But to push
It's such a
the
disingenuous
story,
way to fucking like
not
do an offhanded
disingenuous.
criticism. Everyone, even
Guys,
the
come on.
juicers fucking recognize what you're doing right now. You're literally being like, you did a great job, but it was like a little bit. You know, you could have given a lot more money. And maybe you could have, and I'm sure you did. I gave you literally a link for a
But to be, hold on a minute.
crypto
50,000, yeah.
donation. You only gave 50,000. You have like fucking
150,000. Yes.
okay. Well, great. You have a lot more money than I do, so I'm glad that you did that. Even if you gave $10 fucking, I wouldn't care though. Ultimately, because any dollar is good. Okay.
Right, to be clear though, Trainwrecks doesn't organize his life around these values, doesn't think that society should be organized such that these values are realized to a maximal degree. Nor does Trainwrecks think that you should be able to coerce people into a situation in which we maximize these. So there's nothing inconsistent about him giving less, because it just means that he values these things differently. Now, you might think that that's immoral, right? But the fact is, we all do it. If you're sitting in the same way I'm sitting here, I could be working to earn money, to donate, to help people, to help realize these things. I don't do it. That seems to suggest then that I value this, what I'm doing now, thinking to myself, speaking to a screen, that I value the lives of other people. To some extent, that's true because this is my life and I need to shape it the way that I want it to be shaped. And this is what is meaningful to me. So it's disingenuous to bring up that point because it purposely misses the target about how values interact with how one shapes one's life. But also he fundamentally seems to think that he's ignoring the opportunity cost, he's ignoring how values interact, and how opportunity costs are generated. But maybe that's because that's bourgeois economics and therefore it doesn't get to count this idea of opportunity costs. And then he kind of uses this as a way of avoiding the criticism. And then he attacks them, he acts disingenuous, he acts like Trainwrecks is the one who's not listening, who's being bad faith, who is ugly. He called him look like a fucking ape. He's turning to all of these kinds of like tools and not providing any sort of argument for why not realizing the values that spur on your commitment to socialism to such an extent in which you build a career around espousing these views. You haven't addressed any of these criticisms. You haven't explained to me. You haven't explained to anyone.
Okay.
The difference
Any
is, I
dollar
don't
in that circumstance
preach
is
the things
good.
You preach. Do you understand?
But the
There's a
only
difference
reason
there.
why we have ever talked about the charity, the only reason why we ever talked about that is not to like weaponize it and be like, look how good of a guy I am. The
But
only
that
reason why
is
we
what
talked
you
about
let
it because
happen with your community. Your
motherfuckers.
community
Listen,
does
let me
weaponize it.
explain.
Your community
Let me explain.
does weaponize it. They do, and
No,
you
they
allow them
don't.
to. Okay. Okay.
Brother, the only reason why
so
there
when
was
people-
any
so-
discourse surrounding that was because a bunch of smarmy little fucking dipshits went in and literally went to Speed's chat and were like, it's a scam. It's a scam. The discourse revolving around it. And the reason why Will
Yeah,
even
that
brought it
was
up to you
wrong.
was
That was
because
wrong.
people literally were saying it's a fucking scam. People were
No,
saying
the
I'm
scam
pocketing the
stuff
money.
was wrong.
And the reason why Will brought that up is because of the unfair amount of criticism that I get that you should be able to as a person who gets a lot of unfair criticism by your...
You would only get...
I should point out, going back to the idea of why he gave them, what I can't remember precisely the details, but there was the earthquake that hit Istanbul, lots of people died. He needed to donate money, or this was the more recent one. You recognized the government, the state, was corrupt, that it wouldn't appropriately use the money, so you give it to a charity instead. And this charity will be more effective at realizing these ends than the state. Earlier in this conversation, if I recall, like Hasan seemed to be against the idea of giving to charity because it wasn't socialism. Even if a charity was better at realizing the end states he says he cares about. So this particular idea of donating to a charity because it's more effective than a state seems to go against this idea that the state organization of solving these problems is the best way of doing it and the only way of doing it. And that when you can't do it that way, there is other ways you can do it, which are maybe not might either be more effective. In this case, the charity was more effective than the state doing it. And two, that even if it wasn't, it would still be the case that a distant second is better than a non-existent third. So generally the idea is this. You might not get the ideal, but you can get the second best thing. Why not just get the second best thing? Don't get the second best thing. Do you really actually give a shit about this?
Get criticism because there's inconsistencies in what you donate versus what you preach, right? If you were to show your dashboard for those 5 days you're in the charity, believe me, you yourself would understand those criticisms. Do you understand?
No, it wouldn't.
You don't think
you're
so?
wrong.
You don't think so?
Yes,
Okay.
you're wrong.
I think maybe the idea also is because Hasan has so much money, the idea is that there's, according to his own view, because he doesn't need it, there has been this failure of the distribution of wealth, such that he should be recognizing that this wealth therefore doesn't belong to him, and he should be giving it up. And he should be giving it up voluntarily. And if he can't give it up voluntarily, the only way to do the right thing is to be forced to do it. That should strike us as also very strange. So the idea of the charity thing is like, look, maybe there aren't the proper channels to do it through the government, but there are channels to do it through charity, and that's the next best thing. That's a way of redistributing the wealth that you believe perhaps has accidentally or poorly been given to you. That's what it should be doing. Other than the other kind of problem, I think is more critical is the idea of how he organizes, how he earns money, which is that he is a private enterprise and he interacts with and produces contracts with other individual enterprise people with their own private enterprises. And sure, these people might own their own personal means of production for the work that they do, and they might bring that, and that's fine. There's obviously nothing wrong with that. No, but the idea is that they don't cooperatively own all of the means of production that go into creating the final product. So the moderators don't get a say or any money with regards to any profits generated from the stream, and nor do they get any profit from any video that is made. So the work is effectively being exploited by Piker and people who make the videos. And unless they get a vote in how these videos are made, what the contents of the videos are, and the share of the profit that those videos make, then they are in some sense being exploited. So there's an incongruity about how he organizes his private ventures. There's an inconsistency amongst how he chooses to pursue his personal ventures. And there's an inconsistency with regards to following about how to redistribute the wealth that he's accumulated. These are the issues. Now, you might say that he's living a capitalist lifestyle because he spends his money on lots of expensive things. That's not entirely true. Maybe I'll talk about that next time. I want to talk about capitalism a bit and this misconstrual, I think, of what it is. Which is that there are no capitalist values. There is no capitalist lifestyle. That capitalism, like a liberal democracy, is a meta or a framework for realizing different systems or different values or different lifestyles. But we can talk about that later.
You're wrong. But not only are you wrong, you're also you're also making a fucking assertion here and demanding certain things, or even like implying certain things that would undermine not my the amount of money I fucking put into the charity in and of itself, but also like that wasn't even supposed to be. I wasn't intending on putting $50,000 in there. I was intending on making a portal specifically so that we could fucking making a portal specifically so that everyone else from the international community, as everyone fucking pitched in, put together more money than I ever could have, more money than even you could have. Maybe you could have put that much money. You have a lot of money, but ultimately I created, in your words, a literal fucking system. There you go. So that should be charity and at work. That should be socialism at work. But it's still not enough because it's not enough for you because it's not about me or what I do. It's about how you perceive me.
See, once again, this is just mental gymnastics, political bullshit. It's theatrical, completely
Dude, your
theatrical.
only intention this
told
time,
you-
I've been
Bro,
so
my
charitable to you
intention-
from the jump. The
It's
only
not.
reason
It's
why
not
we've had
at
this
all.
conversation is so that you can try and make me
I'm
look
not
bad over
trying
and
to
over
make
again.
you look
I've
bad.
gone above and
Excuses
beyond
brought these
trying to
topics
describe
up.
some. I've gone above and beyond because,
Excuses brought
like,
these topics
ultimately,
up
this
for us
is
to
good
talk
content.
about.
I've gone above
There is-
and
there is-
beyond
there is no
describing
gotcha-
things to you.
There is no gotcha moments here. We're having a discussion for the things that we disagree on to try and come together. Whether we
Oh, come
come to
on,
a place
Train.
of-
I'm not a fucking idiot. Like, I'm a dumb guy. I'm not a very smart guy. But
Brother,
even
I've
I am
stayed
not
calm.
that
I
fucking
haven't-
dumb.
I haven't. Listen, I've responded to you. I've given you very calm statements. This isn't a got you. I'm not going in on you. I'm not talking to.
Bro, you haven't
understand?
budged an inch, dog. I literally told you I would apologize to you if you could find a clip because I genuinely would be in the wrong. And you wouldn't give me that. But you have never, not
Where
a
do you
single
want me to budge an inch?
not a single
Where,
fucking
though? Where?
concession. Your
Tell me where, though.
understanding of socialism is incorrect. I tried to educate you on the matter. You didn't give a shit. I told you
pick and
examples
choose
of.
when
I told
socialism
you.
applies based on where you make the most money and where
No,
you don't.
but you're still doing it. Your literal
not doing
literal
it.
example is you. XQC
sidestep-
understands what I'm talking about.
sidestep
You have
moderation.
not been charitable at all.
Okay.
Well, if there's-
Moderation is labor for your core moderator team. Do you understand? To say
Yes,
that
yes, and yes, it is
So is there
to
an
a certain degree. It is about what you put in. That is the entire point of socialism, if you want to
understand
consider
that
that.
is
But
up
you're
to
fucking
you.
bringing up moderators right now because you don't give a fuck about anything. You don't give a fuck about anything. You just
brought
care
up-
about trying to win a fucking argument, Train, and you're not going to win it.
I'm giving you my views and you're giving me yours. Do you understand? Like you're getting upset, but we're both just talking, trying to find a middle ground. This is
what
how it
if
works.
the problem?
No,
is
no, no,
that-
no, 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 no.
What if the
I've
problem
been
is that
so
you guys
nice to
don't-
you.
I think it's interesting watching this. I haven't seen Trainwrecks in years, and he is for my impression of him at the time wasn't particularly good. I think what's interesting about this conversation is that there is something to respect here about him. Is that he's not getting angry, right? He's not accusing Piker of being bad faith. He's not accusing him of attempting to win brownie points. He's not attempting to. He seems to be genuine in saying, like, man, I'm just treating this as a conversation in which I have a view and you have a view, and we're just kind of talking about it. You're getting really angry. And maybe you're justified in being angry, but there's no need to, like, kind of grandstand in this weird way of, like, saying that I've been incredibly charitable, therefore insinuating you haven't. I've explained everything to you and you haven't listened. That begs question, because he clearly has listened. Using all these kind of cute rhetorical tools to kind of, like, win the optics of it. But I think, if you're kind of, like, really paying attention, I just did a rhetorical tool to that then. If you're kind of paying attention, like, I think Train comes off really well here. Like, Piker comes off as a fucking jerk. Like a fucking cunt, if I'm gonna be honest.
What if what the problem is that you both don't have the same definition of
He's legitimately like, what the fuck is going on? I'm just trying to have a conversation, man.
what the fuck socialism is?
Well,
when you do, we have a dialogue again. When you do when you
Okay,
do
Train,
philosophy,
read. Okay,
But-
let's Google what socialism is. Let's do that.
Break it down in multiple pieces. Okay, when you approach
Let's
a
do it.
topic,
Let's do it.
it's
Let's do it. Let's do
philosophy.
it.
Let's first finish this.
No. This is important. Let's
yeah, but
Google it so it's not
Google
me
that
saying
thing.
it. So it's it's an objective third party definition. Let's do that.
Train says earlier.
No. I don't
Not-
care what Train says. Just look up the definition of socialism real quick and let's read it and let's talk about whether or not it is actually what I'm talking about or whatever Train thinks it is. I can read it for you if you want, but you can also Google it on your own as well. Right? You're looking at it right now on the Wikipedia page. Let's take a look.
My computer is like controlled by somebody else. I feel like something's
Okay.
on my computer.
Okay. Socialism is
What
a
the
political
fuck?
philosophy and movement encompassing a range of economic and social systems which are characterized by social ownership of the means of production as opposed to private ownerships. As a term, it describes the economic, political, and social theories and movements associated with the implementations of such systems. Social ownership could be public, it could be community ownership, it could be collective ownership, or it could be a cooperative or employee stock ownership. While no single definition encapsulates the many types of socialism, social ownership is the one common element and is considered left-wing. Is that good?
Yeah, I get it.
Do you
Um,
think
get
that
it as
that
well.
is closer? Do you think that that is closer to what I have described through the many different, as I also mentioned, like the many different types of socialism and different types of socialization structures, and how I have chosen to operate?
Yes. And do you understand that the anti-capitalism definitions within that, within the theories of socialism, you preach, yet your entire business model is off of the capitalistic models? No, you decide, you cherry pick and choose which parts of socialism should
No,
apply
allowing,
based on your own
giving
models.
the
Is that not
people,
convenient?
giving the people the freedom to put as much in and also simultaneously
Who
take as
determines
much
that?
back.
Do
They
you not
do.
agree?
They do. That is entirely antithetical to how capitalist organizations work.
Right.
So when
So
I
in the
say, hey,
situation of the moderators and your Twitch chat, your primary revenue source,
you've made merchandise, right? You've made merchandise.
I am not.
Train?
I don't preach what you preach.
Have
right?
you? Oh, so it's okay. So when you make merchandise made in fucking like Bangladesh or whatever, and you take the tidy profit off the tippy top with like some exploited Indonesian child factory laborer that you're drop shipping onto your fucking audience, then that's acceptable because hey, you never said you were a socialist. How about let's talk about your
Yes, that's the point. That's actually the exact point. It's like, yeah, because I don't think it's exploitation. I don't value the same things you do. I don't attempt to organize my life in this way. I'm not attempting to convince others to live the way that you live. I'm trying to convince people, or if I'm trying to convince people at all, to live the way that I live, and be consistent with the values that I have. I'm attempting to construct my own life in accordance to the values that I find valuable. And you, so the thought goes, Piker, is that you aren't doing that, and that is fundamentally something fundamentally wrong with that, or strange, or icky, or incongruent, or that it says something like you don't stand for anything, or your life's meaningless. The question that would be asked, the question I think is really important to ask here is, okay, like I get that socialism and you're a socialist, right? Right, and that you think that things should be organized around a community or around cooperatives or blah, 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 right? Things should be cooperatively owned such that no person owns more of something or gets more of a say over the thing than anyone else. And that's fine. But why do you value this? What value is this realizing, right? And so there's values. So in order to adopt this, you need some sort of values that you think are either congruent or realized in this system. And once those values get spelled out, right, then you can start saying, well, if those are the values motivating this, right, that socialism is actually just a means into an end, right, or the best realization of these values. Since you can't quite get the government type, you can get the other types that you want. Why aren't you doing more of those to the extent that you think they should be done at a grand scale, right? Why? Why do you exploit your workers? Why do you exploit your moderators in the Marxian sense? Blah, 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 blah. Why don't you give up voting like some of the capital to some of the audience that gives you videos? Why don't you now let people who make videos who are seen on this thing in some sense get allowed to have voting rights in how you run your stream? I mean, these seem very strange and perhaps they're quite uncharitable, but I think the idea is something like that. Like, why aren't you doing that? Just saying people have freedom to decide how much they're going to put in or not. That doesn't tell us anything about, because that is completely compatible with capitalism, right? Because capitalism is just, again, this comes down to how we understand what capitalism is. But profit, or producing profit, is just one thing that you can do in a capitalist economy. You don't have to do it, right? People choose to do it, and they choose to do it because they enjoy the benefits they get of getting more out of what they put in, if they put in anything at all. Capitalism, in other words, respects individuals' freedoms in terms of how to spend their money or what to do with their time. Socialism, in some sense, doesn't. Or if it does, it's not clear that it does it any meaningfully different way than how capitalists would do it. Yeah. Yeah.
Your ethics a little bit, because considering from where I'm standing,
and we're not talking about that. We're not talking about Train. We're talking about Hasan. So to flip it, I understand why someone wants to flip it. Someone feels like they're attacked. They don't want to defend themselves. They want to go on the offensive, at least after a certain period of time. You can't have socialism in a capitalist country. The closest we have is worker co-ops. That might depend upon, according to this, how socialism is defined. Because apparently, that might not actually be the case. That co-ops are actually an acceptable form of socialism. But I presume it has to be the entire economy. But again, that would require coercion. You need a pretty good fucking reason to coerce people into doing something. And if you think it's a good enough reason to coerce a lot of people into doing it, then you should probably be doing that voluntarily yourself. And if you can't have socialism in a capitalist country, they're completely
I practice what I fucking preach. You are trying to poke holes in that. You think the moderator angle is an adequate one, so you're going to keep trying to fucking put that down. Go ahead. Tell us about how you make merch. Tell us about how much money you get paid from crypto gambling sponsorships. Tell us about the many people that have reached out to you saying, "Hey, Train, I have serious gambling issues. Could you please squeeze some money for me?" And then your reaction to that. Does that take a mental toll on you? We can have that conversation as well. Let's turn the crosshairs back to you. Let me behave like you do a little bit. And from where I'm standing, I think I have a reason to do this.
I'm not the one selling false hope while profiting off of that hope.
Yeah. You're not selling false hope? Yeah, because you said that gambling is bad? Whoa, book, gambling is bad. Meanwhile, you sit there and you generate hundreds almost of millions of dollars. Maybe half of that now because Bitcoin
I get paid for exclusivity. I don't get paid.
So two things. Piker claims socialism is bad but profits off a capitalist society. And he thinks that somehow that he is admonished from any kind of moral bad actions, but he's willing to kind of claim it of someone else who does the same. But a person who does not claim that capitalism is bad.
Totally, dude. Totally. Exactly. Also, on top of that, I do wish you well on Kick. I really do, because I want a competitor. I want a competitor to Twitch because I think that would make the platforms overall better. But make no mistake, ironically, you started off talking about how you hated how much titty streamers or fucking hot tub streamers and the meta was awful. And now you got porn on your platform. Now you got one of your main poster boys at Kick showing porn to minors. So maybe you now recognize the importance of moderation, especially as it pertains to an overall platform.
Wait. Let me respond to that. First of all, me going on rants about titty streamers 4 years ago or however long ago that was.
Oh, your positions have changed?
Oh, so have H3's positions changed?
Oh, no, I love that. I love that.
Can you change?
Yeah, of course. If your positions on titty streamers have changed, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Okay. I'm glad.
Okay.
But I don't think your positions have changed so much that you think it's okay to show minors porn, right? I don't think that's the case, right?
Of course not.
That's
definitely weird as hell for him to do that. But to bring it from the
How many days did he get banned for that? Off of Kick. How many days did Aiden Ross get banned off Kick?
None of this has to do with the conversation. He has completely deflected now. Piker's really good at taking over the conversation, and a way in which he does that is to you go on the aggressive. Well, the idea is something like you need some way of turning the tables. You need some way in which you're able to go on the aggressive, go on the attack, and to kind of overwhelm the other person with kind of a slew of accusations or insults in order to kind of have people forget about what was being talked about before, right? That's the trick. How does one flip the script? How does one take control of this conversation? The best way of doing that is to grandstand, specifically through morally grandstanding. So the idea one needs to kind of like do, and I imagine I'm not an expert at this because I'm not an expert at this because I don't engage with these sorts of conversations. I'm a philosopher. I don't engage in rhetoric, and I don't think it has anything interesting to tell us about anything. Because it's just a tool to trick idiots. But it's a very powerful tool, and if tricking people into believing what you want them to is the way to do it, then maybe I'm the fool. But the idea is you attempt to, in some way, point out some sort of moral indignation, and then able to flip what's happening. So we take moral reasons very seriously. Moral reasons or morality is a kind of intersubjective, universalizable thing that applies to all rational beings. And we all recognize this, whether we want to or not. When I say something about normativity, you immediately take it as a reason, whether you want to or not, to do or not to do it, right? You might not agree with what I'm saying about some sort of moral claim, but you still recognize it as something that needs to be dealt with. So the trick is to find something in which you can do that, has the person stop to think about what's being said, and then in you go. So the idea is to... What's a good example of doing this? I mean, this is a good example of doing it. Is that... Well, I mean, I think he literally said, what about you? Let's talk about you for a minute. Again, his position isn't on the table here. And given everything I know about Trainwrecks, it doesn't seem that, and I know very little, but I know he's a capitalist. I know that he tells people not to do the things that he does, or that he's not endorsing them as a lifestyle. Even though he does them because they're good for him, it doesn't mean they're good for other people. It's a little bit of strangeness there, but the point is that he's not attempting to coerce anyone into doing what he thinks they should be doing. So he allows people to live as they choose to, and to enter into contracts or relations or whatever, however they wish to organize themselves. That's totally up to them. He's not making claims about how people should live or how society should be organized. Hasan is. That's the question at stake here. And just by pointing out actions that one might take to be morally problematic, or that one might not value, or that one might think is bad, does not instantly mean that Trainwrecks or the person in question is being hypocritical, right? Because that's the accusation, is that Piker is in some sense hypocritical, and this tells us something about him, tells us something about his values. So just because someone does something morally bad, or that we perceive to be morally bad, doesn't mean they're a hypocrite, because they might not think that the thing that's being done is bad. So when he makes the claim about where do you make your clothes, right, in some sort of sweatshop, that's only bad according to the values that Piker holds. That might not be bad to the values that Trainwrecks holds. So with regards to the character and the values, there is no inconsistency, even if you think it's worse than what he's doing, right? That's the claim being made here, not the claim that what you're doing is a bad thing to do. But by kind of putting it in a moral frame, it separates it from the real question at stake here, which is the relationship between a person's values and the way they live. By putting it in a moral context, it makes it universalizable, which requires a person to respond with reasons and not with the kind of internal values. And it causes a person to have to stop and think. And when a person stops and thinks about something, right, they're no longer on the attack, and now you can kind of like go in. And that's precisely what he's done here. He's just gone in on having Trainwrecks think for a second about morally justifying something, which is totally different from justifying through values. And now he is able to go on the attack.
for that?
That's not in my power, but I push for it all the time for these things to
okay.
be bannable.
Okay. No, it's
That's
good.
what
I just wanted to know. So you didn't ban him.
Listen,
Did he
if
get
you're
banned?
so innocent in the areas you're innocent,
Did he get banned? Did he get banned off of Kick?
he did not. If
He
you're
didn't even get banned for showing minors porn on Kick. That's crazy.
Showing
You're
minors
one of
porn.
the co-owners, aren't you? You're like one of the main people that speaks on this.
I'm
yet,
an advisor. Yeah, I'm pushing for.
So you
I'm
didn't
pushing
advise
for
them
these
to
banning
fucking
rules.
possibly ban the guy for showing porn to minors
did.
for a little bit?
I advised him to give a 24-hour, and I chewed him out when I called him, and he can confirm this.
Okay. Well, it's great. 24 hours? You think you should get banned only for 24 hours for showing minors porn? If you think do you think Twitch would? How would you react if Twitch literally fucking banned someone for 24 hours only? There have been instances. There have been instances where it's 72 hours, and even that's longer. And I'm sure you've advocated against that too. Why is there such a gigantic double standard here?
There isn't a gigantic double standard.
There's no
Kick has
double
been out for
standard.
4 months and is still in beta.
So
way you're representing the
you
way
as
you're
an
presenting the
advisor
data
and
is
as like a
disingenuous.
co-owner of a platform can't control Aiden, but you want me to fucking tell my editor what he can and can't say. That's an entirely different point of the
You want me
conversation.
to
But
govern someone that is outside of my purview, regarding my brand and as an advisor to Kick. I don't have that sort of power on Kick. Do you understand?
Okay.
You're filling that
I don't have
gap.
that.
And even if he did, other people have voting rights, such that he could be outvoted. So it doesn't matter what he wants. If a democratic vote ended up generating a different answer, then he still can't get his way.
I don't have that kind of advisor power on Austinox. I don't think that is adequate to do either.
That is
No,
not
I don't.
comparable.
No, I don't.
Really, you don't.
He's a whole ass adult. He's a grown ass adult. He works with other people too when he wants to. I don't have that. I don't
So your
expect to have
comparison
that.
between you and Austinox,
So again, he's a freelancer, but he doesn't co-own anything that he does with Hasan, right? It's just two people coming to a mutually agreed upon contract as freelancers, not as a business. And that is something I don't think can be, it's just not something that can work, I don't think, in socialism, is to allow independent contractors to float around. Because it presumes private ownership, right, of the means of production, as opposed to being owned by the community.
your number one editor and your number one man is the comparison to streamers that stream on Kick, and compared to me as being an advisory role for Kick.
I think the advice you should have given was maybe a little bit harder than 24 hours. Maybe you should have railed a little bit harder on Kick in the way that you expect us to rail on fucking Twitch.
And
Again, see, we're talking about morality now. We're not talking about, like, we are talking about what one ought to do from the moral point of view. We are no longer talking about how one lives their life in accordance to their values and what that says about the person and the values that they hold, right? Which is a totally different conversation. He has now changed the conversation. He is now kind of drilled on what he takes to be something morally repugnant. He is flagging moral indignation about how repugnant it is, and arguably flagging that if someone had done it in his world, the punishment would have been the appropriate form of justice, which presumably would be a permanent ban. But this is not at all what's at stake here at all. We're not talking about from the moral point of view. We're talking about from the point of view of the life that's being lived.
maybe
To
you should
ban gambling.
and maybe
You have a
should
little bit more control over
and
Kick than we do over Twitch, don't you?
and maybe you should have put a little bit more effort, or the same effort you did for the gambling bans that you do for the small to mid-sized creators on the platform while you sit there having a $10 million+ contract. Why don't you put that on hold and push for the small to mid-sized
I really
creators
love
on
that you
Twitch?
think I have a $10 million+ contract. That'd be fucking awesome.
Stop!
Thank you.
I'm talking about the ad incentive deals.
Amazon does not put out flat contracts for
We're
flat
not talking about
amounts
lump sums.
anymore.
I'm talking about the ad incentive heavy deals. If he runs the ads
Even then,
top of the hour like he does, you'll push easily 6 figures plus up to 10 million easily if you do the hours
I
and
hope.
the
I
ads.
hope. I wish. I mean, that's some wishful thinking. But you know what that reminds me of? At
What
the
does it
top of
remind
the
you of?
hour, there's a 3-minute ad break. And if you
Yep,
no longer
there
want to
you
see
go.
those ads, you can subscribe. You can use one other thing that I can't tell you what it is, but you know what it is. Winky face. Here's the 3-minute ad break now.
Interesting. Yeah.
Hey, listen, you guys, you guys are both wrong and right, and you're already in bad
No,
faith.
what am I wrong on? Come on, Felix, get out of here.
I mean, okay, you are wrong because you're
Wait, tell
okay.
me. Tell me
Well,
what
I
I'm
mean,
wrong on.
He's
That
also
is
wrong.
so wrong.
You're also wrong.
Tell me what. Tell me what. I will address it.
One. your misunderstanding and purposeful misconstruing of how TOS works and how it is enforced. What somebody has with a track record of how many years of streaming and how many infractions that they've had, right? And what is the nature of the infractions and the extent, and on top of that, what was
Yeah, I
the
think the nature of the infraction was pretty aggressive in regards to
there is
Aiden.
a significant amount of stuff. Okay, that
Do
goes
you think
into a
deliberately
ban.
showing porn to minors, even if it's your first infraction on the platform, deserves longer than 24 hours?
I think the argument that doing anything is for minors is in bad faith. I think
Completely
Okay.
bad faith.
Do you think
I
deliberately
think-
showing? Do you think deliberate? Sure, fine. Okay. You think that's bad faith?
think
I don't
it's
think that's
trash.
bad faith.
Bad
They
faith.
openly
Bad faith.
stated that they were minors after. But okay, deliberately showing pornographic material to your audience that you know may have actual minors involved in it. Do you think that is worthy, even if it's plus 18? Do you think that's worthy of simply 24 hours?
Well, I think it can be to a certain extent almost illegal. And I'm pretty sure it's illegal to do that. Okay, so then.
So
I-
you think it's worthy of longer than 24 hours? Because Train said he advised, which he has a lot more power over Kick, I think, than we do over Twitch. He advised for a 24-hour ban.
Yeah. I would assume that over there, not a lot of infractions have taken place yet, right? I'm playing devil's advocate, right? I don't know how they enforce the TOS. I know what even is the TOS. Yes, there should be a punishment for that, and it's trash. Okay. Are we going to duplicate their TOS how it works over here, how it works over there? I think we're operating in overall bad faith because of the simple thought that you try to call them out for hypocrisy over the TOS, right? When in fact, the discussion over TOS was how it was enforced on a non-consistent manner back in the days when it came down to certain people doing certain things, not getting banned, and overall, right? And it just didn't make sense, right? That was the real problem. Is that they said, don't do this, and here's all the limitations, and it would get broken all the time, and it would get away with it because of multiple factors. I'm not going to state because I'm going to get banned. If I speak, I'm banned. Okay?
If I had the power to ban, believe me, a lot of creators on that site would be banned right now.
Like the other
Completely
guy
off
who
the
copped
platform.
Dome, the other guy who copped Dome on fucking camera, that was crazy too. I mean,
That
I
was
think he
very
got,
bad.
I think he got banned for what, 24 hours? I think. I
That
don't
was
know.
bad.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm
All-
just
all of
saying that,
these
like,
things-
you know, I
Believe me, listen, what you think moderation should be on Kick, I'm pushing for and advising for. They believe
great.
a free
I
platform.
hope it
I'm
works,
trying- I'm
and I
trying-
hope the clip system works as well. I am excited to see
It
what
does. The
happens
clip-
with Kick.
yeah. I've already-
Okay, last thing. I'll play devil's advocate and say
Or platforming Nazis. I think that's pretty bad too, honestly.
Guys,
But that's
Agreed.
just me.
I completely agree
I
with that.
will go ahead, okay, and play devil's advocate and say that I think Hick,
An
you
hour
had-
14
you had
we
the
got to
wrong
Nazis.
idea of
Nice.
what terms of this were because
They
of certain
did,
clips
and I've talked about this many times.
to a colossal way. Almost like a 99% of people thought, "Oh, this is what Kick is."
People
and
need
they
to
did
understand
something.
there is a
They-
difference between freedom of speech and hate speech. Do you understand? There is
And
a major difference there. Hate speech is not allowed. I'm pushing for us to get a moderation team in place to get this removed across the site. Do you understand? This is the issue. A lot of people have come over thinking free speech means hate speech. That is not the case. Do you
Well,
understand?
that's
These are
usually
values.
why that's usually why they do that. It's like a disingenuous way of framing it. Every platform has, even 4chan has like some speech restrictions on even poll. It's a normal part of the process of like regulating any sort of forum or any sort of place where people congregate. But a lot of Nazis will often utilize that as a reason. But I agree, and I think I'm happy that you are against it. I mean, maybe you'll have advice on how many days they should be banned, but you know, that does seem like a good idea.
I agree with you. And yeah,
I think hate
longer than a
speech
20
should never be allowed. But I do sometimes I feel like sometimes people are personally misconstruing what is a freedom of
true,
speech to try to extend it to whether it's, oh guys, that's hate speech,
they
ban it.
pervert freedom of speech to justify their hate. It's disgusting. It's completely disgusting to pervert the boundaries of
completely
freedom of
irrelevant.
speech. And
So what's really clever here, and we'll see if they come back to it, considering there's another hour for this, an hour and a half for this, but note now they are no longer talking at all about what they were meant to talk about, and it hasn't even, like, they maybe made an hour of talking about this before they've switched topics. Like, he's completely successfully diverted attention away from the problem, or the perceived problem. It's a huge optic victory.
to try and justify the use of hate speech. It's completely disgusting, and I see it happen all the time.
Technically, hate speech is protected under free speech, just for the record. In the United States of America, at least, it's just that private platforms oftentimes have a different level of restrictions, which is understandable. Like I said,
Yeah, by hate speech,
Advertisers,
I'm referring
ads.
to the speech that brings like harm to others.
Violence.
yeah,
Yeah,
that
I
would
mean,
be
I mean,
hate
call
speech
the,
is
call,
part of that.
call to actions or the pseudo call to actions are really, 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 really bad. I mean, I think everybody can agree on that. That's just fucking bullshit.
Train, read the Wikipedia page for socialism before you come on the pod, and then we can have a conversation about it. That's a little bit better than like systems surrounding charity.
Jesus, bro, really?
No, that's not even a diss. I'm being serious. It's a definition. It's like not a difference in agreement. Or Lenin, or Marx,
Ugh,
Engels.
Jesus.
Well, I think the Marx theory wouldn't help your argument. Would you agree with that?
No.
The Marxist theory wouldn't help your argument.
Oh God. Okay, what is the Okay, I have to pee so bad. Can you describe what you mean by the Marxist theory?
Well, let's look it up as well.
No. No. Don't even look it up.
No,
Don't even look it up. I see your
no.
eyes trailing away. No. Explain it to me in your terms. I don't even
read it
want.
like you read that.
I don't even want to. Okay, we
Let's
can
read it
do
like you
that
read
as well. But I
socialism,
want to. But I just wanted to really hear your genuine your genuine take on what you think Marx's
Well,
theory
let's read
was.
it. Let's read it like we read the other.
Okay, this is some juicy content. I kind of want to save it for the pod, to be honest.
I think the general idea of it
Would be not favorable to me.
Well, I think it leans more toward putting what you preach into action instead of just leaving it in.
Wait, but
preaching
just
form.
okay. Let's not dance around it. Just okay, pull it up. Fuck it, YOLO, pull it up.
Okay, Marxism.
Yeah,
No, the Marxist
just
definition of
what
socialism.
socialism is.
No, the Marxist definition of socialism, right?
Okay, Marx's definition of socialism.
Maybe this is a good time to stop here. Because ending into a new area. He laughs, but there's different. Marx isn't the only socialist. There's other forms of socialism that do not accept Marx. So I don't think it's that laughable, but we'll see. All right. Did I make any progress here? I think. Oh man, this idea of meaning in life, making one's life meaningful, shaping one's life to one's value, living one's values, adopting political systems in accordance to values. Values not being embedded in a political system, but being the product thereof, realizing those values, organizing one's life in accordance to values that one would impose upon others through the political realm. Okay. Yeah. All right.